Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our series Fintech Fridays, brought to you by BDO Australia. In our webinar today, we'll be discussing AI in next-generation fintechs. My name is Tim Aman. I'm BDO's Global Fintech Leader, as well as our National Financial Services Leader. Before we kick things off, I'd just like to quickly draw your attention to the housekeeping slide that is currently showing on your screen. To start, you're all automatically muted, but we'll be accepting questions throughout the session, and you can submit these using the question tab. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. However, if we cannot respond to your question, we'll follow up with you after the webinar concludes. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please click the support button, which is one of the bottom tabs of your screen. And finally, this session is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email containing link to the slides and to the recording, access to register for future sessions, and the speaker contact details for all of us. Fintechs by nature are a disruptive force in financial services, leveraging cutting-edge technologies to improve and streamline financial institutions and customer experiences. It's of no surprise that fintechs were among the first industries to be jumping on artificial intelligence and the opportunities that it presents. However, AI also presents a number of growing customer concerns, which we'll look at and explore in today's session. With me today is Benji Ilan-Govin. Hi, Benji. CEO and founder of MyGigsters. MyGigsters is a financial services business focused on helping self-employed individuals and freelancers track and maximize their earnings on gigs, reduce tax and expenses administration, and improve their overall health and safety. I'm also pleased to welcome Jason Catania, Chief Data Officer of Simply AI. Simply AI are a leading consulting provider specializing in data and analytics and intelligent automation. They provide services across robotic process automation, AI, machine learning, and data. Welcome both, and thank you for joining me in today's FinTech Friday session.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about this, talk about integrating AI into FinTech. The rise of AI has often been coined the fourth industrial revolution. It's been around for a while, as you both know. AI's ability to analyze vast amounts of data in real time, coupled with its machine learning capabilities, will empower fintechs to offer even greater innovation, which could ultimately reshape the entire fintech landscape. And I guess maybe, Benji, I'll start with you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about MyGigsters and also the kind of AI technologies and algorithms that you're primarily using.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, and good to see you all virtually. MyGigsters had pivoted a number of times as an early stage startup, but we didn't intentionally put AI because we want to put AI into the machine, but AI seemed to be a good way to automate a number of things. So currently MyGigsters is one of the expense tracking tools out there in the market that automatically identifies potential tax deductions based on your tax profile. So let's say you're a musician working as a self-employed, the system will automatically recognize potential tax deductions based on a musician's profile. A musician's profile could be drive for work, have some gigs that they will rent, and things like that. So essentially, we looked at the transaction history from their bank, and we have an algorithm that works on their transaction history, and then picks out the expenses that are relevant to a musician, and then goes checks whether other musicians have said yes or no to the same thing, and that presents itself as an identified tax deductible expense. The shift is normally a musician would have to go and store a receipt or track an expense themselves. Let's say I've made a $30 purchase last November. I wouldn't even remember what it is. We've turned it around. This is bookkeeping done in the background rather than bookkeeping done actively.
Well, it's quite interesting because I think a lot of founders of businesses, irrespective of musicians, would kind of like this, because even when we first start to talk to some fintech clients, founders are notoriously for not being able to keep track of some of their receipts. So this would be a very, very sort of helpful tool. But Jason, maybe I'll just ask you a little bit in terms of what kind of AI technologies are you currently using in some of your services that you're offering?
And thanks everyone again. I'll echo Benji's comments there. Look, Simply AI has been around for about 5 odd years, and working a lot across the FSI industry, whether it's larger banks, fintechs, or mutuals. They all have a very similar issue. They've got a large amounts of information, and privacy, you'll see data breaches and the like of things like that. So some of the things that we're really focused on at the moment is how we protect this personal information a bit more. So you're seeing a lot of things around data platforms and data security around those. From a sort of a process around these, the chart that you're seeing on the screen now, definitely process optimization is quite crucial. If I can help the consultants or contact center staff better understand who you are and what you're about, and what your credit scores are automatically, that's a really different conversation that those staff can have with their customers. And so we're really focused on that. How do I give a better customer experience and actually get cost out and streamline that process? So definitely looking at that. Fraud analytics, definitely a focus. As I said, back to the breaches, how do we better understand our fraud analytics? So we're doing quite a bit of work around that. I think that's probably the main things that we're sort of focusing on at the moment, Tim.
Yeah, and Jason and I have talked. We're going to try not to look at each other. But
yeah, no, it's very hard not to. He's right next to me.
But I guess, Benji, maybe if you talk a little bit about, I guess, how did you start thinking about using AI when you started the company? And I guess, are you seeing some, I guess more broadly, are you using AI, or is it just mostly within your application, within your business?
I think so. See, going with Jason's point, there is this opportunity to use AI, machine learning, and other tools to automate things, which equates to more efficiency, better insights to data, getting answers, which would traditionally take a long time to do. And that AI gives you the ability to do a number of these things instantaneously. With us, we had a large source of data that we were helping our user base with. So it was just to think, how would AI help gig workers or freelancers manage one of their most painful process is tracking their expenses. Now, just not only for freelancers, right? In our case, we actually sell it to accountants. If you look at it, accountants, they're not really happy with self-employed clients, because the normal self-employed client would rock up to them with a bank statement and a shoebox of receipts and saying, here it is, please lodge my taxes. And now the accountant has to do 80% of bookkeeping in retro. By the time the time is over, they can't even really make best of the claims or anything. So we saw an opportunity where, okay, we've got this large data set that we're anyway having. How can we do it for the user instead of the user having to do it themselves? And AI became that really good handy tool to connect to. And while Fintech is also a really good place, like Tim, you mentioned that Fintech is really disruptive by its nature of being Fintech. And it was no surprise to embrace AI that we wanted, and it is useful both to the customers, but also internally for us to do better things.
And maybe, Jason, do you have maybe give some examples of how AI has improved just your internal operations?
Look, definitely, again, it is a lot of process efficiency. So if I look at, some of the things that we talk around, particularly with fintechs, but I think it's across many industries, if I can understand unstructured information better, so you're seeing a lot of document understanding type of natural language processing that's really come into the market in the last sort of couple of years, and we're getting a lot of success from products like UiPath, H2O. They've got some really good smart natural language processing models already pre-built for you. So I'd highly recommend using some of those, because it can really, rather than manually getting an invoice or manually getting paperwork or legal documents or terms and conditions, if I can actually structure that in a form and understand it automatically, the amount of hours saved just on that alone, and the data quality improves considerably, because there's no manual handover or handoff. So we're getting a lot of success just in that part. And I think we can overcomplicate things. I always go back to basics and go, well, how do I run my business more efficiently? And I'm seeing that as a really good low-hanging fruit for most organizations, to be honest.
Yeah, because you look at, sort of that slide, and I don't think any fintech or any company would, you could argue that if you could use AI to improve stronger security, improve fraud, better customer service, better trading decisions, et cetera, why people wouldn't do it. And I guess what are some of the challenges, Benji, I'll ask you first, in terms of, challenges and limitations, in terms of integrating AI? Are you seeing, places of resistance, because it seems like common sense, but what are some of the barriers that you've sort of encountered?
Yeah, I think to probably the top two ones are, in MyGeekster's case, we handle a lot of financial transaction history. So initially, my users were not really happy by, oh, if AI is telling me what's tax deduction, do I trust it? Do I not trust it? What if it's wrong? We still have a human component, right? So within MyGeeksters, while the information does potential tax deductions, it does go to a registered tax accountant for verification. So now users are happy. But there's also a technical challenge. We can't just send financial information of Benji, the user, to AI. There's design challenges of what data needs to be sent, what algorithm needs to kick in where, or what LLM do we use? Do we use OpenAI, or do we use Claude? Or there's so many AI metrics there. So when it comes to data residency, data sovereignty, especially with financial information, there are some challenges on how would you design the system to not considering privacy risk and financial information risk. That is always there. I don't want anybody to know how much I spent on Dan Murphy's for the last 6 months. So that's those kind of information. So sensibly using AI was one of the challenges that we initially encountered.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I think we do a lot of work for eye care here in New South Wales, and so a lot of times when we're doing wage audits about insurance premiums, getting the proper declaration of wages, for example, that impacts the premium. And you're talking about a cohort of freelancers. When I first came to Australia, cash was king. So in terms of documenting that for a tax return is going to be a bit of a challenge. And I've got a call later today about my U.S. tax returns. You're only happy if you're getting a refund. So the second that you have to start paying things, that's when people probably start asking questions around the AI algorithms. But Jason, maybe we'll come back to some of those points, Benji, about regulation, because that's going to be in privacy. Those are probably two key things that will be front and center in terms of people's minds as we start to adopt AI. But Jason, maybe you share some of your stories about some of the challenges that you've.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges with AI and where people have been sort of caught over the last sort of 5 years, AI sort of started coming through, and it's actually having quality data and repeatable data coming through. That's really key. If you use a snapshot of information, train models, and deploy that, it's a point in time. So if it's not repeatable and you don't keep feeding the models, it actually is not effective at all, to be honest. So it's really, really important. And so what we've found at Simply AI is, yes, we started with data science and AI, that's where we were founded, and that's our DNA. But what we've quickly found is that we really have to help organizations and parties really modernize their data ecosystems, because quality data is essential, right? And many, I would say 15 years of history is sort of another thing that's quite important, because if I train my models in 2 years, I can probably get some biases that's really leaking into modeling. AI is only as good as the data that's feeding it. And we can constantly have these battles with bias. So we're really protecting ourselves against AI and the bias that can happen. So once you deploy AI models, it's really important that you take a step back and you audit those models with a biased mindset, because we don't want that bias to come in. And I think that's one of the threats that I'm seeing in the market now is, how do I make sure ethically I've set up my models for success, and I'm not going to leak into a degrading model with some bias by feeding it incorrect information or a shallow part of information. I think that's really key.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a little bit about bias, because that's probably obviously what, there's instances of where we see that. So we'll explore that a little bit further on. Probably the last question before we move sort of topics, I guess, Benji, where do you see the fintech sector sort of evolving over the next few years in terms of the use of AI? I mean, you've got that chart in front of you. Do you suspect there's going to be further driving or penetration on some of these sort of circles, or do you think there's something that you're aware of from an R&D perspective that you think is going to be the next big application of AI into fintechs?
I think what Magic does, we strongly believe that there was a lot of potential and growth space for innovation when it comes to understanding financial data, whether it's on a B2C on a personal level or at a business level or a corporate level. Currently crunching out numbers in Excel is going to be a thing of the past, and potential AI machines will help us do far more faster, accurate, real-time insights on data. That's definitely number one. Number two, I also see the process automations in a number of different aspects. For example, in us, my Gigster's application automatically consider edge cases. For example, if I had made a purchase more than $300 and I don't have a receipt, the machine will automatically pick it up and say, Benji, looks like you got an expense that you claim for business, but you don't have a receipt. And it prepares an ATO ready tax file report. So traditionally, this would have taken a few weeks and an accounting firm to do, but the machine is able to do it instantaneously or in real time. I see that kind of process automation is going to happen both at customer level, but organization operational level too across fintechs. Yes, there is I think the elephant in the room is going to be adoption and early adoption and knowing what we're doing is, and that will change the way we adopt this thing as we go.
Yeah, and it's obviously, I mean, fintechs traditionally obviously are disruptors and they adopt technologies, earlier. That will be as we sort of mentioned, AI has been around for a while. Even when it first came to Australia, they were talking about, digesting all that credit information to come up with a provision. You had credit meetings that used to take days, that now if you push a button, they can give us a recommendation. So Jason, you kind of alluded to, the quality of the data and the history of the data. I guess if you fast forward a couple of years, what are some things you think within fintech that will evolve, because we'll have 6 to 8 years of data that right now we just currently don't have?
Oh, look, I think back to that customer experience. I think if I look at something like a loan origination or loan setups, which typically can take a few weeks at the moment. I think those types of things, we're already starting to see that with some of our clients, where we've taken a loan origination process and we've brought it in from sort of 28 days into sort of 6 minutes. But typically what some of those lengthy times, it's not the actual effort, it's sometimes all the handoffs and all the different things. So you can actually have automation and AI not as a replacement of people and what they do, but as an assistant. We like to call it a digital assistant, because they're actually doing all the heavy lifting, but you still need a person, you would think, as part of that workflow. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that hybrid model where AI and people are working together to make that whole sort of process seamless. And at the end, net result is our customers get a much better outcome. Having a loan origination done in minutes versus weeks is quite incredible. I think it's going to be a lot more of that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the automation and uptake. I think we're on the cusp of people, starting to demand some of this. So I think that will continue, particularly with a certain generation, cohorts of sort of fintech users. And obviously, also the other parts, what's going to be happening globally as well. So I think, Australia is a great ecosystem of fintechs. So a lot of the great thinking here has the ability to go offshore, and the same the other way as well. So I think it's going to be watch this space. Jason, maybe you talked a little bit about, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of your clients and some of the use cases that they're thinking of using. And I guess, are you starting to see any traditional other sectors start to talk to you about using AI other than maybe the prototypical sort of fintech?
Look, it's across industry. I think COVID's been an interesting journey for a lot of organisations, and it's really heightened the I would call it sort of cost out initiatives. How can I do more with less and actually scale? And I've seen a lot of that. If I look at some of my mutual banks that we deal with, they've got the same regulators. They want to scale, but they can't because it's really a 1-200 sort of people shop. So how do I do that? I've really got to look to intelligent automation or AI, and it's usually a combination of both. If I can't scale without people, I really can't scale. So for that book, I'm seeing a huge change. There's actually a lot of pressure from the regulators in the mutuals to actually start combining. Perhaps we're starting to see that, but I think the mutuals are exciting. I like working with the mutuals because they're quite good collaborators with each other, and I'm hoping that will be a trend across the market as well. Is how do we help each other across different organisations, different industries? I look at one of the things you've got here is fraud analytics. There's a really good opportunity, I would say, is how do we share data better? We've always been very protective of our own customer data, but how can I share data without giving away my IP to sort of knock some of those big ticket items on the head, like fraud? Fraud detection would be much easier if we shared across banking and insurance and telcos. We could really knock a lot of that on the head. So I think we'll start to see some of that over the next sort of coming years, particularly around data sharing to solve that.
Obviously that links a little bit with open banking, and I think, it's going to be, you've seen a bit of a crescendo of some of the regulation on open banking. You've got AI and the opportunity to streamline processes. Mutual banks, obviously, I do a lot of work with as well. And so, they're probably coming from just that process, kind of automation improvement. And I think, so Benji, if you look at, my Gigsters, I guess, what are you going to be doing to continue your journey of using AI? Because probably you get a lot of feedback from your clients, and it's really built on AI. So what's sort of the next generation that you're thinking from my Gigsters, that success 5 years from now, what your platform will be doing?
One of the things that we have already started tinkering is a couple of aspects where can my users have an open dialogue with their financial information? Just like having a chatbot with their own financial bank statements, can they have a chat with them? Can I ask how many times I went to Aldi and made a purchase? And so we're tinkering that to see if that financial co-pilot can be made more conversational, more easy for them to gain information on the go. The second piece of thing that we are also tinkering is we're trying to use data at scale, because there are other problems that self-employed people would normally face, is access to credit, for example. It's hard to get a loan if you are self-employed. So we're trying to see how can we use data to help them or help their credit score, or how creditworthy an Uber driver can be by using data and using AI to then predict what will be their earning patterns based on their earning patterns in the past. This opens up the opportunity to solve another set of problems that are currently not being effectively solved. That is access to other financial services, insurance, income protection, and other employee-like benefits. So that's what MyGigsters is using. Is I want to try and find out where process optimization is possible, but in addition to it, we wanted to take the next step in using these tools that we have. AI is fast growing. We're seeing new types of AI come out every single day, doing more things than the day before. So it's pretty exciting to be part of that whole thing and see what we could unlock 2 years from now.
It's going to be quite interesting. I think, again, if you look at that certainty piece, like, so if you fast forward 5 years and you've been working with someone for 5 to 8 years, they're going to have that financial certainty of tax returns and visibility in terms of that certainty. So it'll be, it'll help, solve some of that, some of the financial pain points, which, freelancers, kind of struggle with as well. And also leads probably to some collaboration opportunities, some natural collaborations with other people in the fintech ecosystem that are have the lending products, but don't have kind of the customers. So you can see how that would naturally evolve. Let me just maybe turn our attention a little bit to data privacy and ethical concerns. You both talked about that a little bit. There are growing customer concerns, or there've always been customer concerns around data privacy, cybersecurity, and dealing with complex or nuanced issues, many of which require human judgment and empathy. And I guess, maybe Benji, I'll start with you. I mean, how did you address, kind of that data privacy piece, when you started to roll out MyGigsters? Because you mentioned about sharing financial information, but is there a worry with your clients more about, what happens with that data? And I guess how have you mitigated some of those concerns?
Yeah, so we're still learning as we're doing, so we can't say we're really perfect and we got all things sorted out. But a couple of things that we do by design of the system is we've de-identified every single data point that connects to an individual, that even if I have the information, I can't know who it is. And that's the design of the system by itself, whether we use AI or not. But also the way that we have set the algorithm, and I'll give you a flow, for example. The application will look at transaction history from 5,000 plus users that we have in the platform on a daily basis. And let's say one of the transaction history from somebody is Hello Wash. Hello Wash in Adelaide is a car wash. Instantaneously, the algorithm will kick in and say, car wash is a potential tax deduction for anyone driving the vehicle for work. And then it'll go and to verify if others have said yes to the same. If others have said yes to the same, the confidence percentage grows. If the confidence is more than 85%, we then present to the user. At no point in this flow, we actually disclose or we let the machine know who this person is. So this is process. When we design the flow, we make sure that we de-identify the user from the data point and keep it in two different places and treat it two different data sets and then treat it. There are still growing concerns on, especially when people wanted to connect the bank. Now we've got open banking and all of this stuff, but people still have hesitance when they come to, oh, you will know all my transactions, and what are you going to do with this information? Do you sell it? All of the concerns are still there. And that's a bit of an education and building the trust with the users, regardless of the AI piece, is to let them know that we've got strong data policies and procedures in place, that we wouldn't do what it's not right by you. So yes, to probably summarize, I think strong customer relationship, solution design, and having good governance will help in handling a number of these things.
Yeah, and I think it's quite important. I just came from, I'm in the middle of audit company reporting season, so things like data privacy, cyber, very, very topical. I think what companies are starting to learn is it's almost like the holy grail. It's hard to be perfect. So you might have a good year, you might have a good 6 months, but aspirationally, it's something that has to keep being worked towards. So I think those points around customer, building up that trust. We'll talk a little bit about transparency, but Jason, just what have you done? I guess because you'll see this all the time when you're working with clients or potential clients around mitigating some of that privacy and security concerns.
Yeah, look, most of the FSI clients that we're dealing with are heavily regulated. So number one is it's just paramount that we get the privacy, and the platform setup really underpins all of that. So particularly with the flourish towards cloud at the moment, there's really a big push towards cloud from on-premise. And I look at all of those things and go, well, it's not to be feared or be scared of. It's very important that we get that design right. So absolutely, virtual private clouds, things like that, where we can actually definitely take care of all the cybersecurity. But even how we move data and store data, all of that's really coming to the surface now. So there's products called Immuta and a few others that are really able to give me security at the attribute level now. So not just a customer record, right down to each field of that record. And so I think things like that are really important, and that's one of my jobs, right? So as a data services business, we're constantly advising and implementing security measures and encryption measures, particularly on movement and rest. These are really key things. I think some of the fintechs, it's interesting. We don't have the heavy regulation on some of the fintechs, and one of the concerns I've always had is how does regulation catch up? But a lot of the fintech having to operate with the regulated FSI, I would call it, they almost have to act in the same way. So you're sort of getting protection that way. I like the fintechs playing with the big banks and the mutuals, because they've actually got to be regulated just by default by doing that. So it is, like Benji said, it's definitely a fast-moving pace. I think it's hard for the regulators to keep up, because every week there's a new fintech. So but we're really working with the larger end of town on helping them, making sure they're protecting all of their customer data. Again, there's a lot of things we're doing around that space, and I think the regulation has a way to go, but I think they're catching up very quickly, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think the regulation, I think you're right. Fintechs, when I first came back to Australia, when I first came to Australia 24 years ago, coming to Australia, it was a bit like the Wild West, and I think fintechs have that spirit of Wild West. They're a bit unregulated, becoming more regulated. You can see it happening with crypto legislation, open banking, buy now, pay laters, etc. So, but what I still like about it is it gives that flexibility for the thinking and for people to try. So, but I think for that full trust to come into the Australian public, it's gonna be linked with regulation. So we'll see how that develops over the next couple of years. And Benji, you talked a little bit about some of the algorithms and the car wash deduction, etc. But maybe one of the challenges, I guess, with the AI algorithms is, I guess, what you can rely upon. And so some of that you guys alluded to is the historical information, the quality of data coming in. But I guess maybe just walk us through some of the steps that you do in terms of making sure my throat's been going for 2 weeks and it's fading now. The algorithm isn't spitting out bias that's going to negatively impact kind of the consumer. And then Jason, I'll ask you a similar question.
Yeah, a very good question. And we still have that element in my Kickstarter system. So currently our confidence rate of recommendations, or what we find, is only 85%. I wish it's more than that. We're constantly building on it. I think this is where the element of system and human interface actually works. In our case, so we have 3 parties that play to create an accurate output. One, the machine goes and finds something that it thinks that it is a detectable expense based on the algorithm that it works on. Now, again, most of these language models, there are different types of AI models, right? LLM is one, generative AI is one. There's a lot of other models out there, and what you call as a car wash could be called something differently in another part of the world, and that could lead into a different result. So constantly trying to tweak the parameters around the algorithm makes the algorithm stay alive and also produce a good enough result. And then in our case, we are a community-backed startup, so we are community-driven. So the element of them having to come and say yes or no to the same, they're actually reinforcing the learning back into it, which is the human element. That's why the community confidence, or the confidence, is really important. The last step, even let's say both of these have got fairly to a certain extent, I still got the registered tax accountant waiting to verify the information. So even if the system miss it, even if the user miss it, I still would rely back to the ATO registered expert to say, hey, yes, it is, no, and we can proceed further. So yes, over time, the machine will become better and people's interaction with those machines will become better. So we might go from 85 to 93, 95 in the next year, and then that might give us more optimization that we don't have right now.
Okay, that's good. And Jason, from your perspective, what do you do in terms of that, I guess, accuracy and the transparency of the output from the algorithm?
Yeah, look, historical data is key, absolutely, because as we train models, we're constantly comparing against actuals, if you like, and that's how you train a model. So if the more history I have, the more I can train my model to be quite accurate. So we've recently done a price propensity model that we've got to sort of around that 95% success, and that's looking at a fleet, a bunch of vehicles, a fleet vehicle company, and looking at something that's valued today, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, and really measuring that. But once it's not, AI is not a set and forget. It's definitely like any data. We've got to constantly tune it. It is quite a complex operation, and I think what's really impressing me lately is a lot of the tech that's coming through allows me to do a lot more computations. And so in the past, I may have had a model that may run for 24 hours. Now I've got a model, that same model that with better tech and better coding can probably run in a few minutes. So it really gives me the opportunity to continually run those models and tune and make sure that my bias hasn't changed. So once we go live, it's very important that we have a team set up around bias, around ethical use, around privacy. All of those things are just paramount. I see a lot of shops thinking they're done once they've deployed the model. That's just the start of the journey. It really is a cycle, and data changes, meaning of data changes. So as that meaning changes, I really need to make sure my model hasn't been affected in the wrong way. That will give us more confidence and give our customers more confidence. I think at the moment, like I like your Wild West analogy. It's still we're all learning, but I think we've got to just be a bit slow and just take it easy, because it's hard to get trust back once you breach that trust, right? So we're really working hard on all of those aspects.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talk about like Chat GPT. Like, I mean, it's a bit of fun. I can push a button and write my daughter's wedding speech, even though I think I probably should write it myself. And I know people like to play around, with that kind of technology. And I think, but when you start overlaying that to financial services in the world of fintechs and financial services, the challenge always becomes, Jason, you sort of alluded to the trust, element. Obviously there's a lot of regulation, even if it's not specifically on fintechs. You got the legacy of the Royal Commission, and making sure consumers aren't being disadvantaged. And I guess maybe this is a question for you, Jason. What's your view in terms of Chat GPT? And I guess it's more about the ability to make sure we're using reliable information, because it's always a bit of fun to look at something. It's just, could I rely?
Look, I think it's served a really good purpose, I must say. Look, AI is something I love, but what it's done for the industry it's incredible. So even my mother, who's not very good on technology, is talking about AI and doesn't really know the sort of why, but I think it's captured everyone's imagination, and that's what I like about it. But you're spot on. It's like Google. We all became doctors with Dr. Google, and I think it's a similar thing. We've got to take it through. I think you're right. It's quite interesting and exciting, but this is not something that's going to go away. It's going to get more and more complex, more and more sophisticated. But again, it's how do we trust, and how do we earn that trust, and then how do we maintain that trust? So watch this space though. It is very, very exciting about what's happening, and I think it's back to my comments I said earlier around that digital assistance. I think having humans in the loop is always going to be a crucial part of the trust. So I think if we can have a combination of getting the heavy lifting done by some of these new AI techniques, that's fantastic. Then I can actually really focus on the added value for my customer. I think that's where I'd like to see it go. A lot of startups are probably excited and writing their winning speeches, but I think there's a way to go. But I'm generally very excited about what's happening in the market. I think it's great.
And Benji, what's your view of ChatGPT?
Before I share that, I think there's also an element that of businesses such as like startups like us, we have a responsibility to also educate our users of the rapid rise of this technology and how we can use it and how should not we use it. In my Gigsters case, a number of gig workers are actually very young. They're Gen Zs, or they are coming from a culturally and linguistically diverse audience community. So their understanding of fintech or financial services is really different because from where they come and what they do. So it's part of us is to not just give them a fancy little tool that works magically now, but also educate them on what to do and what not to do and what are the constraints of this. And that open dialogue between the business and the users, as Jason mentioned, it significantly improves the trust in that process. With ChatGPT, yes, I'm a pro user of ChatGPT now, but the ChatGPT is fun. It's really cool. I think it's kind of that it's let the world know what AI means. I think before that AI always existed. It's just that it was not fancy enough for people to take notice. Now ChatGPT gave that visibility for that. But again, many people think ChatGPT is the only AI tool that's out there. No, ChatGPT is an application built on an AI, and the actual AI algorithm is an NLM run by OpenAI, and there's hundreds of other tools that are out there. The thing about use of these kind of applications is they are really good with certain use cases, and they're really bad with certain use cases. So it's very important to understand what you can do. You can definitely write a wedding speech out of ChatGPT, but you can't do more sensitive or more critical information with that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I think, I've got two children, and both, one's in uni or in theory in uni, and his friends are using ChatGPT to find answers and not go to class. My daughter, a bit more focused on school, she's been told by school use ChatGPT. She doesn't want to, so like you can even see with the younger generation in terms of the shortcut to get to an answer, or do you need to learn something? And we're starting to see that even in the accounting profession, so if we're getting a cohort of people that actually don't understand what they're doing, but they've been leveraging AI to come up with the answers, that doesn't work. And to you guys' point, like you need that human intervention. And and so people still need to know how to do things. It's just how do you go from the fact that if you can get a machine to do 90% of the thinking, but you then understand how to interpret that, good. So I think it's even at the younger generations, there's some people that are really sold on it. There's a bit of fun, obviously, but again, it's that when you come into that regulatory space, and if you're looking at AI and make investment decisions, and then you're linking it in, is that a bad decision? And then we have Royal Commission coming in and saying, Jason, why are you advising Benji to buy this? And then we're going to bring AI algorithm. And so you can sort of see where this is, particularly in our space, which is good because we know we've got to keep that ethical barrier there, because it'll come unstuck very quickly in services if people start identifying unethical behaviors. But Benji, maybe you could just sort of share, when you started out My Gigsters, is there a customer story that really resonates, kind of with you to say, freelance Bruce Springsteen coming down to Australia uses My Gigster to track his, Australian tax deductibility. Is there a good success story that you can share in terms of one of your clients? You don't have to name Bruce Springsteen if you don't want. You can.
No, thank you. I think one of the most exciting part of running My Gigsters is I have been a gig worker myself. I came to Australia as an international student 8 years ago, and I was one of these people who would deliver food, fix IKEA furniture, do a lot of gigs myself. So it came out from my own experience of being in this new and fast-growing digital economy. So fast forward, when I had the chance to solve this problem, I was really excited, and the team was really passionate to solve the problem. So every day when we see our users go find tax reductions that they didn't know it was there, it gives us enormous joy that we were able to find $100 tax reduction for a food delivery driver is a lot. You may not think it is a lot, but it's actually a lot. Because of the thing you mentioned, there is a different emotion to a 9-to-5 and a self-employed. A 9-to-5 walks up to a new financial year seeking a refund from ATO, but a self-employed walks to the ATO to pay the money that is due, and that's a different thing. That's paying is not a happy feeling. So My Gigsters, as of today, we have saved over $300,000 in tax saving across our user base. Every day we close to depends on the number of, so we have over 60 types of freelancers, all the way from drone pilots to game streamers to NFT artists to musicians, massage therapists, and all of them use the system because it is very digital and can do so. The success for us is when users go and find tax reductions that would traditionally be harder and also difficult to trace. This is automatically done. Now that's right now it's tax lodgement season. We are seeing all of that coming to fulfillment because they are able to reduce their taxes.
Okay. Maybe let's talk about innovation and sort of staying competitive, because obviously you both are, yes, that constant cycle of innovating. But Jason, can you talk maybe what you do in terms of making sure, you talked about reviewing and looking at the data quality, but just talk a bit about the process of continuing to innovate, and what are you doing in the background to innovate before you start to go talk to clients to make sure you're staying up to date and changing kind of market conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's key to our business. Basically, we're working very, very closely with the larger sort of vendors out there, understanding what their roadmaps are, the Snowflakes, the Databricks, the Amazons, the Microsofts. Where are they going, and how are they solving some of the problems that we've talked about today? But we're very close to a lot of the more I would call it the Fintechs of the technology vendors. They're all solving some amazing things. I've mentioned a few, but Amuta, Fivetran, Coalesce. It might seem boring to people, but we're solving things where we had to do quite intense coding before. The H2Os of the world, great bunch of data scientists that are bringing a lot of science to shops that maybe can't afford to go and hire data scientists from the market. And by the way, they're very hard to get anyway because it's quite a scarce industry. So I think those things, we're very close to a lot of these technology partners. And then what we help clients with is how to bring them together, because it's very confusing. There's a lot of players, and which ones do I use? What benefit do I get? If you start doing your own analysis and haven't got that background, it can become, I don't know, I call it analysis paralysis, but it can become very, very confusing, and eventually you go nowhere. So, in companies like Simply AI, we can come in and advise you and help you understand what's good for you, and actually what investments have you already made, and how do we return on investment on that first, because we can constantly go for that shiny new toy and not get an ROI. I think it's really important to just mix it with that. What do I need to do as a business? What questions do I need to answer? And then how do I look forward rather than looking backwards all the time? So that's really our mandate. How do I look forward, and how do I happening next? A lot of those techs I've just mentioned are fantastic, and there's more coming in all the time. But our role is to really advise and implement those technologies in the best way we can to suit the client's needs.
Yeah, that's a good answer there, Jason. Benji, maybe you can talk a little bit about from your perspective, as you're sitting down there in Adelaide, are you, you brainstorming internally in terms of AI kind of algorithms, or are you partnering with other people in the ecosystem in terms of some of that thinking?
Oh yes, 100%. I think at least in my district, we are the strong belief that we could only solve this problem at scale by partnering with other organizations who have also got the common vision, and that includes everybody else in the financial service industry, right? I think AI is disrupting all parts of financial service industry in some shape or form. Finding that right partners, for example, our tech stack is not just built by MyGigsTers. We've got different players in the tech stack. We've got open banking players, we've got data residency players, we've got cloud providers, we've got native cloud AI tools. And we got other service providers. So for example, in MyGigsTers case, we've got 60 accounting partners who actually connect to the platform. So it is truly an ecosystem game. So in order to solve this problem at scale and also efficiency, I think, and also being very competitive in this market, you got to work together, and that's the only way you can actually solve this much more faster. The other thing is you don't always have to reinvent the wheel, because you don't have to go create your own custom AI and do this. There are a lot of AI tools that are out there, and there are new tools coming which is helping you to keep your own data in your space. It's not shared. Google has done a lot of investments in AI, and there's so much happening and so much forward potential that it is only going to make it easier for businesses to connect with each other, share data, share processes to solve and service a customer.
Okay. Maybe Jason, this is a question for you. I guess you talked a little bit about fraud before, but where do you see AI kind of playing a bigger role, I guess, in fraud detection and prevention? Because obviously that's a hot topic with a lot of our regulated entities.
Yeah, look, I think, if you look at the breaches that we've seen, the Royal Commission, the money laundering type activities, I think AI has a huge play in that. Having automation of credit risk checks and validations without having to make it sort of hard for consumers, I think that's really so. We're seeing a lot of development in this space. Fraud detection has always been there, but it's how sophisticated we can be to make that seamless. Otherwise, it's very hard to use, right? And so fraud models, money laundering models, price propensity models, they all sort of go hand in hand, working together. So I can actually have a sort of a just-in-time sort of result as I'm talking to my customer, or my customers on my website, all of those things. That's actually happening in real time. All those things I mentioned before around computation, that's getting better and better and better. I can do more with less, and I can do those things in real time. So I think there's a lot more happening in this space, and the next couple of years, it's generally very exciting, very exciting.
There's actually a question that's come through, and Jason, this is probably one for you. I guess it's more around when anyone encounters data or documents in the public domain that are protected by copyright. Do the algorithms exclude such documents so that copyright is not breached? Maybe you can just walk people through.
Well, look, straight away, there is a decision that needs to be made. Whether it's not AI making that decision, it's still humans making that decision. So AI is essentially a code, if you think about it. So a human is making those code changes and setting in those rules. So depending on the regulation and depending on the copyright laws, that would be put into that model. So when it's trained, those rules are put in, and obviously, like any change that we make, particularly in those sensitive areas, there's all audits, there's checks, there's business sign-off. I think there's a misunderstanding with AI that it can be rogue and it can go off and do what it wants, but it's still coded by humans, and so all the measures that we've always done with coding still stand. So all of the checks, all of the quality checks, all of those things are still very, very important in everything that we do. So it's up to the business and the people coding to make sure all those things are put in place, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I think people think it's like the Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to be created, and rogue decisions are made. So it's obviously exciting, and I think it's if we fast forward the next 10 years, we're going to see huge changes, and you've already seen the last couple of years. So exciting times, but it's a difficult sector because we're balancing lots of different things: the trust, transparency, end users, financial data. So it's not just the fun part about how do I study for an accounting test. So these are kind of real life things and real life issues. Just trying to finish our session a little bit on the human impact. And Benji, probably from your perspective, people are pretty happy to be using my Gigsters, because they're not worried about it's going to replace kind of a job. But do you have any views when you talk to people just that are thinking of adopting AI? Are people worried that you're talking to that's going to replace jobs, or do you think people move past that a little bit?
I think we get both views in the room, and it depends on how you see technology and how it would influence and impact what you do, and that's where the opportunity for innovation is. At least where we stand is, I'm strongly with I'm seconding what Jason said. Is AI is here to make your life easier, not to replace things that you have. As in, it's not here to. It's only here to make things more efficient, so that you could add more value to where you can, instead of doing the works that you don't have to do. And with every release of a new technology, there has been a little of hesitance at start, but over time, people do realize that, and people do adopt it at different shapes and forms. With AI in fintech, I think we are in many ways just scratching the surface. We would love to see more adoption and more use cases being solved, but at the same time, it's not to take people away from their jobs. It's actually to help them do better, faster, and more productive and more optimized work. And that's the whole objective of using any kind of automation tool, to be honest. So that's how at least I see, and I will encourage everybody to see it in a very similar way.
And Jason, I guess, yeah, in terms of when you're talking, say, with mutual banks, there's probably the imperative to change. What are you seeing as some of what's holding people back from knowing that they need to automate versus actually doing that?
Well, good question. Now, look, I can't speak for everyone, but I think automation. Back to what Benji's saying, automation is not people's jobs and organisations. It's actually as industries and technology always improves, new jobs are being created. So we're actually freeing up some of the mundane pieces of work, and we're actually, it's almost educating people on that journey. So they're actually becoming a different version of themselves, if you like. So, I think some of the limitations that I see in some of the mutual banks, it's the fear of the unknown. And I think there needs to be a lot more education in that space around what it can do. It's not taking my job. It's improving my job. And I think that even simply we and other organisations like us, we can probably do a better job at education. And the mutuals themselves in that sector, definitely in education, because it is a traditional sector. And when I talk to some of the staff and some of the people in those organisations, they may have been there for 25, 30 years. So it's about educating, taking them on the journey, and actually showing that they shouldn't be fearful. They should embrace it, because I don't really want to have to do all that paperwork. I actually want to talk to my customer. I want to get new books. I want to grow the business. And I think that's the exciting bit. We've just got to get people out of that fear. I think education is really key to that.
So Benji, question for you, I guess, 2030, CEO, big listed company called My Gigsters. What does success look like for you? I guess if you fast forward sort of 7 years, particularly around the use of AI, kind of in Australia.
Our mission is, to help in many ways gig economy and people who wanted to do side hustles and second jobs and digital work are growing. Australia is not the biggest gig working contributors, but across the globe we have over millions of workers doing this. So My Gigsters wants to be truly global, and AI is one of those important tools that will help us to be global in providing these services across the globe. That's what we see we would do in the next few years, and then be able to be positioned as this toolkit or admission or a financial admin co-pilot for people who wanted to do self-employment or sole trader in many ways. We wanted to be their central financial service platform. So they can simply plug in and it does it for them rather than having to do it themselves. That's the key that we are looking for, is to how can we use technology, especially AI, in helping them do things that they would not normally do or they would not consistently do. And can we use AI to help them do it for them instead of them having to do it? So it's very exciting. It's going to be challenging. We see adoption of any new technology goes through a series of like a curve up and down, because different cohorts respond differently to technology. So we're excited to see how we will learn and unpack those opportunities. As Jason mentioned, we're also keen to understand how AI regulations will catch up, and how will that set the scene? Will it be a blocker or an enabler? It's up to see what the future holds in that space. And Tim, as you mentioned, I'm also excited to see other fintech companies adopting AI, so that we could just be a good Lego toy rather than just being one single toy.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. And Jason, last word for you, I guess. Any advice for people listening in terms of embarking on AI journey?
Well, I think there's two things. I'd definitely be calling BDO and simply AI to help you through that journey. It really is important. Just some of those brief conversations and actually almost educating of the art of what is possible. Don't overanalyze. Don't overanalyze is my absolute number one. You'll go crazy. I highly recommend really looking at your business strategy and understanding your customer better. How do I do that? How do I really democratize data? That's what I want to be known for. I want to be known for someone and an organization that really helps clients and customers really understand information more and get the best out of it. There's a long way to go. I like Benji's comments earlier. We've really just scratched the surface. It's very exciting, and I think for everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the discussion. Thank you, Benji and Jason, for your valued insights. I'm sure hopefully everyone would agree this was a great session. Thank you to the audience and attending this FinTech Friday, and we look forward to returning in a few months' time with more FinTech content. If you missed it, BDO has also launched this year a new FinTech video series called Fintechs of the Future, where we interview some of the most inspiring leaders and innovators in FinTech, both domestically and globally. You can visit our YouTube channel to watch some of these episodes. The details of this webinar will also be shared with you in the follow-up email today. Finally, before we close, we'd appreciate if you could fill out a short feedback survey, which will launch once we close the webinar to help us improve future sessions. Thank you for joining us today. Benji, see you at Intersect. Have a great Friday. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.